There is a silence that follows every wound. It lingers, unseen, like the faint echo of a scream that never reached the air. You know it, that silence, the one that came after someone dismissed you, after they treated you as if you were invisible, after they laughed at your softness, after they turned their back when all you wanted was to be seen. And you carried it, not just for a moment, but for years, sometimes decades. A silence like that does not simply disappear. It folds itself into your bones. It creeps into the back of your mind. It whispers in the places where you once believed you were enough. And so, you wait. You wait for someone to look at you and finally say the words you've been starving to hear. You matter. You are worthy. But what happens when that recognition never comes? When the world keeps moving, blind to your presence, deaf to your voice? This is where the shadow begins to stir. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think about that. The hunger to be valued, the ache to be seen, the silent longing to be enough. It all becomes a script written in the dark, a script you follow without realizing it. You walk into rooms already smaller than you are. You shrink your voice, you mask your brilliance. You doubt the very things that set your soul on fire. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, you believed them. The ones who couldn't see you. The ones who never recognized your worth. You believed their blindness was truth. But listen carefully. Their failure to value you does not mean you are without value. Their silence is not a mirror of your worth. It is a mirror of their blindness. Still, here's the paradox. We spend so much of our lives waiting for recognition that we forget the recognition we are searching for is ours to give. And that is terrifying, because it means the wound of invisibility was never about them. It was about the part of you that abandoned yourself. Picture it. A child holding up a drawing, eager for someone to notice. And no one looks. So the child lowers the drawing. And years later, the same child, now in an adult's body, still hides the drawing, still hides their soul. This is the quiet tragedy of unrecognized worth. It is not that others failed to see you. It is that you learned to turn away from yourself. But here is the secret. Recognition is an inside war. It is a reclamation of the pieces you buried. It is the slow, painful courage of saying, "I see me," even if no one else does. And yes, it hurts. Because when you start to see your own worth, you will also see how much you've allowed others to trample it. You will see the friendships where you gave everything and received nothing. The relationships where your silence was mistaken for weakness. The moments you laughed just to keep the peace, while something inside you died a little more each time. To recognize your worth is not soft. It is not easy. It is a violent unmasking. A tearing open of the lies you once swallowed whole. It is the confrontation of the shadow that says, "You are not enough," and never will be. And when you face it, you begin to realize something shattering. It was never about being valued by them. It was always about remembering you had value before they ever arrived. You were worthy before the betrayal, before the abandonment, before the silence, before the laughter that cut like knives, before the rejection that still burns when you think of it at night. Worth is not a prize given by the hands of others. It is the fire that was in you before you took your first breath. And maybe your life until now has been the long forgetting of that fire. Maybe the shadows you faced, the heartbreaks, the humiliations, the wounds you buried, have all been part of one thing, a brutal remembering. Because to remember your worth is to become dangerous, not dangerous in cruelty, but dangerous in clarity, dangerous in silence that does not shrink, but stands, dangerous in the unshakable knowing, "I do not need your recognition to exist." That is the storm we are about to step into. The storm of shadow and light. The storm of what it means to finally see yourself before anyone else does. Stay here with me. Walk through it. Don't turn away. Because this is not just another video. It is a mirror. And sometimes, the mirror cracks so we can finally see. So I ask you, what would happen if you recognized your worth before they ever could? Let's begin not with philosophy, but with something closer, more fragile, more human, a memory. Maybe yours, maybe mine, maybe something we all know too well. You walk into a room, the air is heavy with laughter, with conversation, with connection. But when you speak, the words fall like stones. No one catches them. No one notices. You pretend you didn't care, but inside something cracked. A small voice whispered, "You are invisible here." Or maybe it was in a relationship. You gave your soul, offered your tenderness, waited for the other to see the beauty in you. But instead, they looked past you as if you were a shadow flickering at the edge of their vision. And you wondered, am I asking for too much? Or is it that I am too little? This is where the wound begins, not in the betrayal itself, not in the silence or the rejection, but in the meaning you attach to it. Because when the world overlooks you, you don't just feel unseen. You begin to question if there was ever anything to see. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's because accepting yourself requires looking into that wound, not away from it, into the place where you learn to doubt your own light. Think about the first time you realized your worth could be ignored. Maybe it was a parent who never really listened. Maybe it was a teacher who dismissed your effort. Maybe it was friends who chose others over you. These moments seem small, but they write deep scripts. The unconscious absorbs them like ink into paper, and from then on, part of you begins to carry the belief, "I am only as worthy as they say I am." This belief is not spoken out loud. It doesn't need to be. It lives in posture, in silence, in the way your eyes drop when someone interrupts you, in the way you laugh at jokes that cut a little too deep, in the way you stay quiet when you want to roar. Worth then becomes conditional, a fragile thing you wait for others to grant you. But what if they never do? What if you live your entire life waiting for a recognition that never arrives? Here is where Stoicism meets Jung. The Stoics told us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But what does that mean when the wound is not just a thought, but a memory? When it's not just logic, but an ache in your chest? It means this: the world may ignore you, but your soul still demands you listen. And until you do, every silence from the outside will echo louder. Every rejection will feel like confirmation. Every dismissal will become a scar reopened. So how do you begin? How do you turn toward yourself after years of turning away? You begin by seeing the scripts, the hidden patterns, the unconscious agreements you've made with the shadow. Look closely. Have you noticed how often you choose the same kind of people, the ones who cannot or will not see you? Do you notice how you give and give and give, hoping someone will finally say, "You're enough"? And when they don't, you blame yourself, not them. This is not coincidence. This is repetition. The psyche has a way of circling back to the wound, over and over, as if replaying the pain could somehow unlock its secret. But it never does. It only deepens the groove until the shadow grows stronger and your worth grows quieter. Imagine this: a cracked mirror in a dimly lit room. Every time you stand before it, the reflection is distorted. Your face bends, your body warps, your eyes seem farther apart than they should be. You stare and stare, trying to fix the image. But the glass itself is broken. This is how the shadow distorts self-worth. You are not broken. The mirror is. Yet we spend years, sometimes lifetimes, trying to repair ourselves, when what really needs to be confronted is the broken glass, the false reflections, the distorted stories etched into our psyche. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong work of integrating shadow and self, of reclaiming the fragments scattered by wounds and silence. And individuation often begins here, the moment you realize the mirror lied. But there is resistance, a strange resistance, because if you suddenly recognize your worth, you also have to face the truth. You let too many people treat you as if you had none. And that realization can feel unbearable. It can feel like betrayal, not just by them, but by yourself. So what do? We delay, we excuse, we rationalize their blindness as our own fault, because it is easier to stay small than to rise and confront the fact that you were always more. This is why Jung's shadow work feels like a descent. It is not about becoming new. It is about confronting the old ghosts, the masks you wore, the silences you endured, the places where you traded truth for belonging. And here's the paradox. Belonging built on invisibility is not belonging at all. It is exile with company. And you deserve more than exile. Let me ask you something. If tomorrow no one acknowledged you, if every voice around you fell silent, would you still know you mattered? Or would you crumble, searching for a reflection that never appears? The answer to that question is the measure of your shadow work. It is not about how others see you. It is about how deeply you can see yourself when the room is empty, when the silence is deafening, when the only eyes left to recognize your worth are your own. This is only the beginning. In the next breath, we will step deeper into the patterns, into the stories we repeat, the wounds we reopen, the archetypes we unconsciously play out. But first, pause. Feel the weight of this truth. You were worthy before they ever looked your way, and nothing they did or failed to do could erase that fire. Pain is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers in the quiet moments, when you lie awake in bed, unable to sleep, when you walk into a room and feel an invisible weight pressing on your chest, when someone speaks a phrase that seems harmless to them, but it slices into you like a knife. This is the echo of a wound you thought you had forgotten, and yet the body remembers, the psyche remembers, the unconscious remembers. Carl Jung often said that what we repress does not vanish. It simply waits in the shadows. Like a ghost, it follows us into every relationship, every decision, every silence. And sometimes it wears the face of the person we least expect. We all carry these forgotten wounds, the child who grew up unseen, now seeking validation in every gaze. The teenager who was mocked for showing emotion, now hiding behind a mask of strength. The adult who lost someone too soon, now terrified of letting anyone close again. We do not realize it, but much of what we call personality is just scar tissue. Scar tissue over the original injury. And this scar tissue has its own life. It forms habits. It dictates what we tolerate, what we avoid, what we run toward. It teaches us to call certain things love, even when they resemble abandonment. It convinces us to call certain things safety, even when they are cages. Jung believed that to truly heal, we must first turn toward the wound. Not with anger, not with judgment, but with radical honesty. What is the pain you tried to forget? The betrayal you never spoke of? The humiliation that burned so deep you laughed it off at the time. The quiet neglect that made you believe your needs didn't matter. Most people never ask these questions. They escape into busyness, into performance, into the endless cycle of doing, so they don't have to feel. But the shadow is patient. It waits for silence. It waits for stillness. And then it returns. Think of the times in your life when emotions seemed disproportionate. A small criticism felt like an earthquake. A minor rejection left you spiraling for weeks. A simple goodbye triggered the same dread as abandonment. That was not about the present moment. It was the past replaying itself. It was the unconscious dragging the forgotten wound back into awareness. The pain we bury does not disappear. It becomes the script we unknowingly act out. We repeat it over and over until we choose to face it. There is a paradox in this. The very thing we try hardest to avoid, the old grief, the old wound, the buried shame, is the very doorway to freedom. But to walk through it requires courage, because facing the forgotten pain feels like stepping into fire. It feels like drowning. It feels like death. And yet, it is not death. It is transformation. Imagine yourself standing in front of a broken mirror. Each shard reflects a different version of you. The smiling mask you wear in public, the wounded child you hide in private, the angry shadow you project onto others. And behind it all, the real you, the one who carries both the wound and the possibility of healing. To live consciously is to stop running from this mirror, to stop pretending the cracks aren't there, to sit in the presence of the pain and whisper, "Yes, I see you. I will no longer forget you. This is not weakness. This is the beginning of strength." The world often teaches us that healing means forgetting. Move on. Get over it. Don't dwell on the past. But forgetting is not healing. Forgetting is exile. And what we exile always returns. The unconscious has one mission: to make us whole again. And wholeness cannot exist if we amputate parts of our soul. So, the forgotten wound will call us back again and again until we choose to listen. This is why Jung spoke of the shadow not as an enemy, but as an ally. It is the part of us that refuses to let the wound die in silence. It insists on being heard, even if its language is conflict, depression, or sudden anger. And so, when the pain rises uninvited, when the memory you buried resurfaces without warning, do not curse it. Do not call it weakness. Do not call it failure. It is the soul knocking on the door you locked long ago. It is the forgotten child finally asking to be seen. This is the truth about healing. It is not about erasing pain. It is about remembering it with compassion. The wound does not vanish, but its grip loosens, its repetition softens. And slowly the scar becomes a symbol, not of what broke you, but of what shaped you. The scar becomes a doorway, a quiet reminder that you survived, and that survival can be the soil of wisdom. Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Healing is not solving. It is outgrowing. It is carrying the memory without letting it define your destiny. But this is only the beginning. Because once you remember the wound, once you allow yourself to feel the forgotten grief, a deeper challenge emerges. The challenge of what to do with it. Do you let it control you, or do you learn to alchemize it? The Stoics would say, pain is not your master unless you hand it the chains. Jung would say, pain is not your prison unless you mistake it for your identity. So the question becomes, can you hold your wound without becoming it? And here is the paradox. The wound you despised becomes the wound that teaches you compassion. The pain you buried becomes the soil where new meaning grows. The memory you feared becomes the teacher that awakens you. The shadow is not the end of you. It is the invitation to a deeper self. A self that is no longer controlled by pain, but forged through it. This is where emotional alchemy begins. The process of transforming suffering into wisdom. It is not a quick escape, not a self-help slogan, not an easy redemption. It is a long pilgrimage back into the places you once fled from. Because healing does not mean forgetting. It means remembering without being destroyed. It means holding the memory in your hands and seeing it as part of the sculpture of who you are becoming. And when you accept this truth, you stop running. You stop waging war against your own soul. You begin the slow work of integrating the shadow, of becoming whole again. The human soul has a strange gravity. It pulls us back toward the very wounds we try to escape. This is why some people leave one toxic relationship only to enter another. Why some repeat the same self-destructive choices no matter how much they promise themselves otherwise. Jung called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the original wound again and again in hopes of a different ending. The child who was neglected seeks out lovers who abandon them. The one who grew up unseen finds workplaces where their worth is ignored. The betrayed find themselves drawn to people who betray. It feels cruel, but the psyche is not punishing us. It is seeking completion. The wound wants to be resolved. The soul keeps placing us in familiar fires, hoping we will finally walk through the flames with awareness, rather than collapse in them. But until we recognize this, life feels like a curse, like invisible chains dragging us into the same abyss. This is why so many cry out, "Why do I always attract the wrong people?" Or "Why do I sabotage my own success?" It is not random. It is memory disguised as destiny. It is the shadow replaying itself on the stage of your life. Imagine your soul as a hidden theater. Every unhealed memory is an actor waiting in the wings, and until you face them, they will find a way to walk back onto the stage, over and over. This is the part of shadow work most people resist, because to stop repeating the cycle, you must name the pattern. You must admit that the enemy is not only outside, it is also within. And here lies the pain, the realization that sometimes we are complicit in our own suffering, not consciously, not willingly, but by refusing to look deeper, we keep handing the keys of our life to the very ghosts we're running from. Yet there is hope. For once you begin to see the pattern begins to lose its power. Awareness cracks the spell. Naming the wound is the first step to reclaiming your life from it. Think of how these loops appear in ordinary life. The woman who keeps choosing partners who belittle her, though she swears she'll never repeat the past. The man who sabotages every opportunity just as success approaches, because somewhere deep inside, he fears being seen. The friend who always ends up in drama, no matter how many times they say, "This time will be different." On the surface, these patterns look like bad luck. But beneath, they are unconscious vows, silent contracts we once made with ourselves. Perhaps as a child we whispered, "If I don't shine, I won't be attacked." Or, "If I keep people at a distance, I can't be abandoned." These vows calcify into invisible rules, shaping our choices, our relationships, even our sense of self. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The truth is, many people are haunted not by the world, but by the younger versions of themselves they've left behind. The abandoned child within, the silenced teenager, the humiliated self. They linger in the shadows, demanding to be heard. And so, life keeps sending mirrors. A boss who echoes the disapproval of a parent. A lover who carries the same coldness of childhood neglect. A friend who awakens the jealousy you buried long ago. The world becomes an echo chamber of unfinished business. The repetition feels unbearable, but hidden inside it is an invitation. Will you finally stop running? Will you turn toward the shadow instead of away from it? Because here is the paradox. What you most fear facing is the exact key to your liberation. The wound you avoid is the door. The mirror you despise holds the truth. But the ego resists. It insists, "It's not me, it's them." And in that denial, the cycle continues. Only when you pause, when you dare to ask, "What is this teaching me about myself?" does the spell begin to crack. Awareness creates distance. Suddenly, the shadow no longer drags you by force. You begin to see it, to name it, to recognize its disguise. And in that fragile recognition, something extraordinary begins. You no longer just live your story. You start to rewrite it. The first step in breaking free is not dramatic. It is not about burning bridges or forcing radical change. It begins quietly, with awareness. You pause long enough to notice the pattern. You whisper to yourself, "I have seen this before." You begin to connect the dots between the old wound and the current mirror, and suddenly, the illusion of fate weakens. Think of it like waking up inside a dream. At first, everything looks the same people, the same conflicts, the same pain. But then something shifts. You realize, I am not powerless. I am not condemned. This is a script, and I can rewrite it. This is where the alchemy begins. Instead of running from the partner who triggers your abandonment wound, you ask, what part of me still believes I am unworthy of staying? Instead of blaming the world for never recognizing your worth, you confront the part of you that never recognized it first. Instead of resenting those who betray you, you look inward. Where do I betray myself? This work is not comfortable. It feels like peeling skin from bone, because every answer points you back to the shadow you've tried to bury. But here is the paradox. The moment you stop running, the shadow transforms. It is no longer just pain. It becomes a guide. It becomes the very force that deepens your soul, hardens your strength, expands your compassion. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not free of flaws, but whole, integrating the parts of yourself you once exiled. And in that wholeness, something miraculous happens. You stop needing life to keep sending the same mirrors. You no longer attract the same wound dressed in new faces, because the lesson has been integrated and the contract dissolved. The world feels different, lighter. The chains of fate loosen, and for the first time you taste the possibility of living, not as a prisoner of your unconscious, but as an author of your own becoming. Awareness is a crack in the wall, but the wall does not fall so easily. Even after you see the pattern, you are tempted to return to it. The shadow has gravity. It pulls you back toward the familiar pain, like a planet you cannot yet escape. This is the most dangerous stage of the soul contract, the in-between. You know the truth, but you do not yet know how to live differently, and so the war begins inside you. One voice whispers, "Stay. It's easier. The pain you know is safer than the unknown." Another voice insists, "Leave. Break the cycle. You deserve more than this repetition of wounds." Both voices tear at you, and you feel as if you are being split in two. Jung warned that this is the moment when many people collapse back into old habits, not because they lack strength, but because they fear who they might become without the familiar suffering. Pain, after all, gives identity. It gives story. It gives meaning, even if that meaning is destructive. To let it go feels like stepping into emptiness. Imagine a person who has always defined themselves as the abandoned child. To release that story feels like erasing themselves. Who am I if I am not wounded? Who am I if I am not betrayed? Who am I without this shadow that has lived in my bones? This is why people sabotage their healing. They crave freedom, but the prison is also home. And yet, if you endure this stage, if you stand in the storm long enough, something begins to shift. The shadow no longer feels like an enemy pressing against you. It begins to reveal itself as a fragment of your soul, a fragment that wants integration, not destruction. It is not here to punish you. It is here to complete you. This is why the soul contract exists. Not to trap you in suffering, but to drag into the light the very piece of yourself you swore you'd never face. And in the mirror of the person you can't keep, you see not only your wound, but also your path to wholeness. When you first confront the shadow, it does not bow. It resists. It mocks you. It whispers every cruel story you've carried since childhood. You are unworthy. You are forgettable. No one will ever stay. It knows your weak points because it is you. It is not an outside enemy. It is the scar tissue of your soul, the voice that grew from your earliest wounds. And so, when you try to silence it, it only grows louder. When you try to exile it, it only grows darker. When you deny it, it takes control in secret ways, through addiction, obsession, jealousy, and the endless cycle of losing what you love. This is the paradox Jung understood. What you resist persists. The shadow cannot be destroyed. It can only be integrated. But integration is not gentle. It feels like a death. Imagine standing before a mirror that shows not your face, but every memory you've buried. The betrayal you never forgave. The humiliation you never spoke of. The rage you pretended was peace. The desire you shamed into silence. That mirror does not blink. It does not soften. It does not care if you are ready. And when the soul contract activates, when life sends you the one person you can't keep, it is as if the mirror steps out of the glass and walks toward you in human form. You cannot run, because they live inside you. You cannot destroy them, because to do so would be to destroy yourself. So you do the only thing left. You sit in the fire, you let it burn, and you wait. This is where the alchemy begins. Not in escaping the pain, but in staying with it long enough to hear what it wants to teach you. The shadow does not ask for your perfection. It asks for your honesty, to say, yes, I am wounded. Yes, I am afraid. Yes, I crave what I should not crave. And in that moment of truth, something softens. The war loses its sharpness. The shadow is no longer just a wound. It becomes a guide. Because only in walking with your shadow do you find the fragments of power it has been guarding all along. The paradox is brutal. The very person who could not stay, the one you begged the universe to let you keep, is also the one who gave you back to yourself. Because in their leaving, you met the emptiness you had always avoided. And in that emptiness, you discovered what no lover, no friend, no savior could ever give you. The ability to sit alone with your own soul and not collapse. This is individuation. The slow, painful process of becoming whole, not perfect, not untouchable, but real. Jung wrote that the shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of life. It is not your enemy. It is your unclaimed inheritance. It holds the parts of you that were cast away so you could survive in the world. The anger you needed to set boundaries, the grief that would have drowned you, the fire that was too bright for those around you. And when you accept it, when you finally turn and say, yes, you are mine, you belong to me, something shifts forever. The face of the shadow softens. It ceases to haunt you in others. You no longer need the mirror of painful relationships to show you what you refuse to see, because you see it now. And from this vision comes freedom. The freedom to love without clinging, to lose without collapsing, to walk into the unknown without demanding that it promise you safety. This is why some people appear and vanish like comets. They are not punishment. They are not cosmic cruelty. They are initiators. They carry the keys to doors you would never have opened alone. You may still ache. You may still dream of them. But beneath the ache, a deeper knowing grows. They gave you something greater than permanence. They gave you transformation, and so the contract is fulfilled, not in keeping them, but in keeping what they awakened. The shadow no longer hides in the dark. It walks beside you, and for the first time you are not afraid of yourself. So here you stand at the threshold of your own becoming. The story has unfolded in fragments, a meeting, a fire, a loss, a wound, and then a quiet return to yourself. But the question lingers. Why does the universe send you someone you cannot keep? The answer is not found in logic. It is found in rhythm. The rhythm of your soul's evolution. Some people enter your life to stay. They weave into your days like familiar music, steady and enduring. But others are like thunderclaps. They tear through the silence, leaving you trembling and awake, unable to go back to who you were before. These are not accidents. They are soul contracts, agreements written in places beyond memory, where two spirits decide, I will break you open. You will hate me for it, but you will thank me, because without it, you would never awaken. It is an unbearable paradox to love deeply, to lose painfully, and yet to be grateful, because the one you could not keep was never meant to be your home. They were meant to be your fire, your mirror, your storm. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote that the meeting with the shadow is always a defeat for the ego, but it is also the birth of the self. And so the loss is never just a loss. It is a dismantling. It is the death of an old identity. The you who depended on another to feel whole. The you who mistook attachment for destiny. The you who feared solitude like death itself. That version of you dies in their leaving. And though you mourn it, you are lighter without it. This is why the universe sends you someone you cannot keep, because you were never meant to remain unchanged. You were meant to break so that you could remake. And in the quiet aftermath, something extraordinary happens. The love you thought you lost, it begins to flow differently. It is no longer tied to a single person, a single memory. It expands. It becomes an undercurrent in everything. The sun through the window, the silence of your room, the pulse of your own breathing. You realize at last that the one you could not keep was not your source. They were your spark. And the source? It has been within you all along. One day you will look back, not with bitterness, not with longing, but with a strange, reverent gratitude. You will whisper to yourself, they were never mine to keep. They were mine to learn. And this is the secret the universe keeps hidden until you are ready. The people you cannot hold are often the ones who hold the key to your awakening. They do not stay, because if they did, you would cling to them and never learn to stand on your own ground. They are the storm that shakes you awake, not the calm that lets you sleep. And so you stand here now, changed, wounded but awake. The wound is still tender, yes, but underneath, something fierce has been born, a strength that cannot be given by another. A strength only born through loss. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Perhaps this person you could not keep was not fate at all, but the unconscious finally made visible. A fragment of yourself you had exiled, returning through the face of another so you could reclaim it. And when you do, you discover something devastatingly beautiful. You do not need to keep them, because they were never separate from you. They were always a mirror, a reflection of your own soul calling you home. So let them go. Not in bitterness, not in despair, but in reverence. For they came to deliver a message no one else could give you. You are already whole. You are already love. And the universe, it sends no one by accident. If these words stirred something in you, if you too have met someone you could not keep, know this. It was never punishment. It was initiation. You are not broken. You are awakening. And if you wish to go deeper into this path, to understand the shadows within you and the strange beauty they hold, then stay with me. The next story will take you further into the heart of Jung's most haunting insight, why the people who hurt you the most are often the ones who reveal your hidden self. Because the universe does not take, it transforms. and your loss was never an ending. It was the beginning of you.